And we are live, season 2, Conversation-05, and we have Ramaa Venugopalan as our guest today. These conversations are brought to you by the Vivekananda Institute for Leadership Development, which is a unit of the Swami Vivekananda Youth Movement. And these conversations hope to bring to you, speakers and people from a wide range of backgrounds and spanning topics of development, social issues, leadership, education, culture, heritage, and much more. And like I said, we are in Conversation-05 of season 2. And it's a pleasure and privilege to have Ramaa as our guest today. Ramaa Venugopalan is a practitioner and teacher of Bharatanatyam with over 2 decades of experience in performing and imparting this ancient art form. She's a firm believer in the traditional vocabulary and diktat of the dance form. Ramaa holds a master's degree in Bharatanatyam and its allied subjects such as Indian philosophy, history, and temple architecture. Natya Vyasa Upasanam is a series of videos on social media where she attempts to bring out the depth and rootedness of Bharatanatyam through her reflections on learning, observing, and teaching Bharatanatyam. Her articles are also widely published in art magazines and portals where she shares her thoughts and ideas about the uncompromising versatility of the art form, its diktats, and its trajectory in the current scenario. Her design of the course, Evolution of Gender Equality in Indian Classical Dance for a credit course for the Azim Premji University master students, has enabled a cross-section of students to gain a wider and deeper perspective to the concept of classical dance, its history, relevance to society as well. Ramaa regularly conducts talks and demonstrations to a cross-section of audience to help them endear themselves to the dance form. Ramaa, welcome to this conversation.
Namaskaram. Thank you so much for having me. It's such a privilege to be sharing my thoughts on dance with VD. Thank you.
Thank you. I'll start with one of the things kind of intrigued me when I was reading out the introduction, introducing you to the audience, was that dance by its very nature, as I see it, as somebody who knows very little about dance, is in a sense a refinement of the art of communication. Now we speak of to be in flow, and dance, as I see it, is an expression of that flow. So when you speak of traditional vocabulary and diktats, what exactly do you mean? So how does that fit into the general layman understanding of what dance is? So is it possible to, essentially what I'm asking is it possible to stick to the traditional vocabulary, the diktats of the medium of the dance, as well as, and also ensure that you can be in flow and creativity need not suffer from it?
Very good question to ask. Let me first begin with the basics. Dance is essentially a method of communication, and it is a natural ability in every human being, or perhaps even in animals, right? So we all dance. Dance, I won't say dance, but I would say movement. We just jive, we move, we throw our hands, we make faces whenever we are trying to communicate. So when you take something called as a traditional dance form, as you rightly said, it is nothing but the refinement of these gestures, refinement of these expressions that has been codified, and it has a certain vocabulary to it. It's like a language. Now, when you take any language, we have the grammar, we have the structure, we have the do's and don'ts, how to use that particular language to effectively communicate. So dance traditional vocabulary is that it is the grammar of dance. Now, can it communicate very easily to every layman? No. But is it something that everybody should know before they watch? No to that too. Just like language, we learn to get used to this form of communication as and when we constantly engage with it. For example, when we are listening to music, right, we might not really know what exactly the singer is singing. Music is universal. If you take any language, we can just close our eyes or we just listen to it and we just engage with it. It goes with the flow. Similarly to dance. But the difference between dances and music is that dance contains a lot of hand gestures. It contains movements. It contains mathematic rhythms, and it looks very complicated. Here is where the rasika comes in. Here is where rasotpatti comes in, and here is where the engagement comes in. The more and more audiences sit, watch, engage, over a period of time, they develop an affinity to be able to understand what is happening. If a layman comes to one particular dance and looks at it, it is going to be Greek and Latin. But if the audience constantly engages with it, over a period of time, they figure out the patterns, they figure out the movements, they figure out what the dancer is trying to do. It is definitely possible to engage and be open to receiving it and experience dance for what it is. So in one way, it's not something that is so easy that everybody can understand. And on the other side, neither is it such a rocket science that if one makes an effort to engage, that they cannot understand. If that answers your question.
Yeah.
Regarding the traditional form, Diktat, it is. I mean, everything in this world has a structure. Everything has a logic to it. So does dance. There are certain movements. There is codified grammar that we need to follow. We follow that, and that becomes a refined aesthetic performative experience. So that is how it is.
So just as a follow-up to that, do you sometimes worry, with the way, I'm moving into this earlier than I thought I would, but do you sometimes worry that given how, the world is changing in terms of how it's reacting not just to culture itself in general, but also in terms of its how it's reacting to dance, music, and all of that. You sometimes worry that in the attempt to make a lot of changes, do you worry sometimes that a lot of what you call the grammar of dance, the grammar of which is essentially the grammar of heritage itself, do you see that getting lost in some sense, or do you think that there is a lot of that is still retained now?
I won't say it's lost, but I would definitely say it's evolving. It's changing. And sometimes I do feel with the surge of the new generation, the social media, and just the fact that dance, music, or any art form is so much out into the open, one does tend to get carried away by it, and one feels entitled to perhaps play to the gallery, or one senses a lot of freedom and says, oh, I'm just going to break this open and do whatever I can. That definitely is happening. But on the other hand, there are still plenty of performers who kind of adhere to the structure and grammar, who believe in it, who have an unflinching faith in it, and who believe that if they continue to stay within the structure, which in itself is quite versatile, that they can continue to communicate and make a mark. But I think it's also natural. I mean, with time, with people who are practicing it, the kind of intentions they come up with, the kind of upbringing that they have, the kind of thoughts that they are putting into dance will change. Any art form will change. Any art form will evolve. We just have to live with it.
So it doesn't, I'm assuming that it doesn't worry you too much the way
it does. Because perhaps
that's what I was getting at. I just wanted to know if, and are more people worried like you, or are there less people who are worrying about it?
I would say less. See, I think it's really just about the times that we have. And I think most importantly, it's about how, see, when I was learning dance, my teacher gave me enough food for thought for me to be convinced in the structure that I'm following. So if every teacher enables the student, is able to open up so many doors and windows to the student and says, hey, you don't really need to, look very far away. There's so much in our dance that you can explore. Then it's a different story. But if the teacher or the practitioner very easily gives up on that conviction, then one goes in all directions. I am worried. Certain times I'm very annoyed. It irritates me a lot. Thankfully, I have a few good friends who give me a very wise counsel and saying, you do what you do, let the people do what they do. But as wise as it sounds, we do live in an ecosystem. We do live in a community of dancers, and every art leaves an impression. Dance leaves an impression. If 100 dancers together are going to break the shackles and do something totally different with it, that creates an impression. And people begin to think that, oh, this is what is dance. That worries me. Especially with the generation where they have so much going for them. What I personally observe is a lack of conviction, the lack of patience to stay with it, because dance takes time, art takes time. One needs to have the time to invest, and it will speak to you in different ways, in different phases of your life. One must be able to hold on to it through those phases to see how how it's responding to you. Perhaps the lack of that impatience and the want to get things quickly is what is creating a different kind of an impression right now. Yes, it bothers and annoys me a lot.
Since you brought this up, I'll do a little. I'll make a little segue now into. So, what brought you into dance? Did Bharatanatyam choose you, or did you choose Bharatanatyam? And what did how did it communicate to you then, and how does it communicate to you now? Have I added up too many questions to this?
No,
yeah.
No. I mean, it's a very normal part, I think, in any South Indian household to, expose some form of an art to our children. So if the child is singing, then it's a very natural thing for the parents to get the child to join some music class or dance class. And it was very similar to me, for me too. And my mother was a Carnatic music singer, and she was mad about Bharatanatyam, but in the age that she lived in, she was not allowed to dance. So she felt that if ever she had a daughter, she would ensure that she would get a chance to learn. So then I was born very late to my parents, and I was very, I was like a malnutrition child. So very conveniently, in the road parallel to my house, there was a wonderful dance teacher, my teacher, Srimati Rangashri. So my mother just put me there so that I could get some exercise and become fat. But I think over a period of time, I just took to it. We are all born with some talent, and perhaps this talent is there in me. For several, at least for the I started when I was 5 or 6. So I think at least until I was in my late teenage, it was just a rigor. It was a practice. You come from school, you go to class, you don't question, you don't think that much. And we lived in very different times where there was no social media. There was not many dancers in the space. So we all had our time and space to dwell and be with dance in whatever form it was. So initially it was just a discipline, and I did not find any reason to rebel or not go. So it just stayed as a part of me. It was only much later, after my mother passed away in 1998, that I really began to look at dance in a very different way. There was a vacuum initially for the first couple of years after she passed away. So that vacuum gave me a lot of time to think about what dance meant to me. And then I was teaching in my teacher's school. That's a part of our training. We learn and then we teach the juniors, and that just goes on. So when I started out on my own as a individual teacher, I think that's when I started really understanding what I had practiced for 15, 20 years of my life. And I had a bunch of very young students with me. So that helped me a lot. We kind of grew up together. What all I had learned, I tried to put it on their bodies. And that's when I started looking at dance beyond me. And then one thing led to another, and I did my master's. And, to be under the umbrella of someone as eminent as Dr. Padma Subramaniam, that opened multiple doors for me. Indian philosophy, temple architecture, iconography, Puranas, Itihasas, languages. She kind of just brought all of it together in one umbrella, and she mapped it so beautifully for us. We were the first batch to do that. That's when everything came together, and then it's been fascinating.
And all of that was communicated or channelized through the medium of dance.
Yes, yes, we did have, in the master's program, we did a lot of studies. We did theory papers where we learned about these allied subjects. And then it was also about, how dance and music and art, all of these are, allied arts, really. You can't look at them individually. You have to be able to look at them as, as a part of another. That's when the correlation happened, and it continues to fascinate me till today. It's just gotten more deeper. It's gotten more, it's a joyful process, and I really enjoy it.
And if I, the relevance of dance to society, it was clearly mapped out in the earlier times. Even a cursory reading of the earlier times tells you that there was a clear role for dance as a. Do you see that having changed, or do you see that changing? What is the relevance of dance to society from what it was earlier versus what it is today? Has there been any good that has come out of? I mean, assuming that there has been. I mean, we've agreed that there has been a lot that has changed. So, how is the relevance? I mean, I'm assuming that we know for a fact that it's still relevant, but how has that relevance changed, if at all, in terms of its cultural, historical heritage, and all of those things?
I think I would, pragmatically, I don't think any art has any relevance to society anymore. This is my personal observation. In the times that we live in, it is a privilege to be an artist. And it is only an artist's passion or their, their perseverance that enables each artist to be with it, regardless of what is happening outside. If you look at it practically, right, any artist that you take in today's time, right, there is no real patronage like how the kings used to patronize arts in the earlier years, right? So there is no government help. It's there, but it's scattered. It's not something that an artist can anchor on and say, oh, the government is helping me, so I can create whatever art I want. Everything is so personally dependent on each other. So if I have to thrive as an artist, I need to have a support system. I need to have somebody to back me. And I need to constantly create these networks of people, of organizers, of somebody who's willing to sponsor. Most often than not, even that's not there. It's only by my madness or the artist's madness that one keeps creating. They find avenues to present their art form. Relevance of society, I'm asking that question myself, especially in the pandemic. How many of us really thought that, okay, why isn't there any music? Why isn't there any natka happening? Why isn't there any dancer? That's really the last thing that anybody is going to think of, right? And even if one would think, it would be very vain to say, okay, I mean, that would be the last thing that one actually pays attention to. There are far more important things in the society that needs attention. But having said that, if you do look at the value that studying an art form brings on an individual, that is priceless, because it, first and foremost, it brings in a certain amount of discipline. It brings structure into your life. It gives you perspectives that you can think upon. It makes you a more sensitive person. It helps you be vulnerable. It fosters physical well-being. It fosters mental well-being. It fosters emotional well-being. It improves your interpersonal skills. It also helps you identify with who you are as a person. And it helps you understand that if you want something, then you just got to go do it on your own. So then you realize how you can be a self-starter and a self-motivator. So art has an immense, advantage for the practitioner. How relevant it is to society, I'm also questioning it. I don't think I have definite answers.
I just hope you realize that, in a sense, you contradicted yourself at the two ends of the answer. When you said, it doesn't have a relevance, and then the number of things that you listed.
I'm saying personally. I'm not
personally,
saying
correct.
Yes.
But I'm assuming that more people would choose dance or any other art form as something that they would learn along with whatever they are doing. They would obviously have there would be a rub-off benefit of all of this, right? I mean, all of that which you mentioned obviously should be there.
Yes,
and
so
therefore,
that's what I'm saying.
and therefore, and personally, I would think a society that doesn't respect or doesn't give art forms and culture the necessary encouragement, or even or doesn't build the support structures, would necessarily. I don't think that is a society that would necessarily flourish. I think one of the reasons, if we look at the history of India's cultural evolution, it's primarily it's fundamentally premised on the encouragement that most people, you spoke about kings and many of these who encouraged art and the expression of art itself, and not just dance. And so that's and it's sad that it's it's and when your point about not many people even concerned about what happened to dancers or to performing artists for that matter during the pandemic is an important point. I think that's something that everybody needs to pause and think about.
It is, and I also say this because even prior to pandemic, right? As active performers, as active artists, one of the constant worry for all of us is, are we going to get an audience? Right? That's always a big question. No matter how much of effort that you put in, PR, more marketing, tell people WhatsApp, whatever, right? It's still a big question because we are never guaranteed audience. Audience either don't turn up, and I don't blame them also, because if I want to go watch somebody else, the whole thing has to be conducive for me, right? Considering the traffic, the practical, the logical problems and everything. So then one does sometimes wonder, saying, okay, I'm doing all this for whom? We spend months together planning a production, and then 30 people turn up, 40 people turn up, 100 people turn up, tickets are not sold. And this is an ongoing problem. It's an ongoing challenge. I'm not saying that there are easy answers to it, but I think it is very reflective of the fact that art, I'm talking about all performative arts. I'm not saying only classical dance.
Right.
You take theater, you take folk dance, for example. It is in a very, it is in one particular segment of the society where people will come only if it is convenient. They don't really particularly come because you have thousands of people who love art and they want to watch it and they want to be engaged with it. I don't think we are there. And if anything, I think we're just going on a downward spiral. But this is my personal opinion. Not to sound cynical, but I'm just
no, not at all. I think the whole purpose of the conversation is also to explore, the difficult areas and really look at, open the windows into what the real problems are. I think that's the reason why we're also, doing this conversation. So people who listen to you speaking perhaps would also think about these things, because that's the whole idea. All art has some purpose, I mean, some intent, right? It has some core purpose. That purpose, a part of the purpose is embedded in the individual, but there is also a collective purpose that art has in society. Whether I mean we can say that that collective purpose is vanishing or diminishing or whatever, but art has always had some purpose and some core intent as well at the heart of it. And this intent gets translated at both the individual level and also at the collective level. And in that context, how far do you think art has moved away from its core purpose? And do you think in moving away, I think broadly we agree that it has moved away based on whatever we've spoken to. Do you think it's, I mean, it's a cliche, but I'm still asking that, is it moving away in the right direction?
See, when we say art, it encompasses many.
Right.
It has music, it has instruments, it has nataka, it has everything. I will speak for dance because just to keep the context aligning to dance. I will compare it with theater because theater has a more social relevance, because through theater you can address a lot of questions and a lot of causes. And theater renders itself more versatile to speak of social causes, social problems, activism and things like that. But when you take, I'm going to stick to Bharatanatyam. When you take Bharatanatyam per se, personally for me, I believe that the intent is just to enable the artist and the rasika to experience moments of joy when they are in that same path. Through those moments of joy, both the artist, the dancer, and the rasika are possibly able to connect to joyous moments and are able to touch certain vulnerable, happy emotions within themselves that connects them to the humanness within them. Because predominantly, when you take a Bharatanatyam repertoire, right? Bharatanatyam has three important segments. You have the rhythmic part, which is basically movements which are not suggestive, but they have a lot of geometry in it. It has rhythm in it. It has math in it. And then you have the expressions or the abhinaya, which is connected to the poetry and the music, right? So you have the nritta, which is the non-expressive component, and we have abhinaya, which is the expressive component. Now, when I am on stage and I am talking, I'm delineating, say, a moment of moonlight and a cool breeze, and maybe I'm just spotting the gopura of a temple, or I'm just seeing a few cows going back into their shed. Now, that's a small moment that not many of us often think about or often engage with. So in that moment, in that brief moment of what the dancer creates with the poetry, with the music, with the setting, and with the movements of the dance, both the artist and the rasika are able to enjoy that movement and feel, okay, that was joy. I think that is all is the purpose. Now, this is at a very base level. If I extrapolate it, I can also have a moment of complete immersion. Say, for example, I'm delineating, the bells of a particular temple. And in that moment, the heroine loses herself to the deity in that particular temple. That could be an absolute poignant moment of devotion that perhaps any person will be able to experience at some devoted point of their life. So dance has the capability to help us get in touch with our own emotions and make us feel a little bit more human and be cognizant of those vulnerable moments in our day-to-day life. That, I think, is the essential purpose and intent of dance. It has to be light, it has to be joyful, and it has to be a moment where everybody comes into this bubble and they feel very nice and they can say, ivat chanagittu, santoshvagidini, I'm happy. I think that's the purpose of art. Now, of course, you can take this to say whatever you want and all that stuff, but I think in the times that we live in, we need more connection to the human within us. And I think dance enables that. It's been my personal experience. So I think that is the purpose of dance.
Yeah. So when you say, so in that sense, how has dance helped you to connect to the person within? You spoke of it just now.
I'm saying it just helps you to connect to those moments of vulnerability. For example, if you're, say the dancer is out there and she or he is describing a moment of sorrow, okay? And then I'm sitting in the audience and unknowingly, I'm so immersed in it that I shed a tear, right? That's a moment we have. I remember this one performance where I was, and that's etched so much in my memory. So this dancer was delineating Krishna and Yashoda, whatever. So right in front of me there was this very old lady. So as and when the dancer was like showing the gesture, this grandma, she was like holding Krishna like that, and I think she was just reliving her own moments of maybe with her grandchild or with her child or whatever. That's when I was sitting there behind actually saying, oh, he could have done that better, he could have done this better, oh, this is wrong, and this is whatever, the critique part of it. In that moment, that's when I just realized that, oh, I think this is the purpose of dance, that somebody who doesn't know the technicality is able to abandon themselves and just be in that one moment, right? And I've also had, I've been in performances where, dancers have had such wonderful movements that I have just forgotten what it was, and I've had tears in my eyes, or I've just been dumbfounded. It's like watching cinema. In that moment, you think everything is happening to you, and dance has the power to do that. So therein, for those brief moments, you at least feel, okay, I'm still human, regardless of what is happening in my life outside. And I think that's good. And if that gives you joy, why not?
What I also meant, Rama, was to ask about the own personal journey that dance takes you along. I got what, I do see what you're saying in terms of, people being able to connect at a level. But there is also this about, when you practice on your own, or when you're simply practicing, when you're in that moment, when all you know is your dance, and you are in that moment when the dancer, the dance, the expressions, the story, and all of that, we see it in other things, and I'm sure you get what I'm trying to get at. All of them, become one in one sense. So that also is an inner journey, right? So in that sense, do you see earlier, for example, I personal example is I would think of MS Subbulakshmi when she's singing. I don't think she ever saw an audience. She sang for herself, right? And when I say self, I mean the self, the inner self, as in, and that's one of the reasons why any song that she sang means so much more than anybody else who tries to replicate what she tried to do, because it doesn't capture the essence of what she was doing. So in that sense, this inner journey that dance, music, and all of that facilitates, in a sense. How do you see that, mapping to the need also to perform to an audience? So how do you manage the contradictions of also doing it for your own self, and also catering to an audience that perhaps may not necessarily understand why you're doing what you're doing, kind of? Do you see that?
Okay.
Yeah.
The truth is, all of us dancers exist with this, Ramesh. I mean, none of us have cracked the code, or as far as I know. The moments that you speak of, right? See, it is something like meditation. If I'm sitting for my sadhana, right, I am the discipline of a sadhana means that I spend 1 hour or 1 hour or 10 minutes or whatever. But am I completely with my meditation, with my breath, or whatever it is? No, it takes so many years, and there are moments that one can, and then the mind again is jumping all over. It is very similar with dance too. Dance is relatively better because when you're dancing, when you're in practice, when you're in sadhana, you are so bound by the structure. By the structure, I mean the music, the rhythm, the mathematics, what you have to do, adhering to the poetry. So those are a good, what do you say? They are good anchors for us to hold to, so we don't kind of stray when we are practicing. So with doing that repeatedly, right, it becomes a body memory. So a lot of times, see, it's like writing. You begin to write, you just keep typing, right? You're not expecting Zen moments when you write. It happens only once or twice. Similar with dance. to say that, oh, every time I practice, I'm in this great Zen movement. No, it doesn't happen like that. A lot of times we practice because we have to practice. It's that 1 hour of discipline, and you have things to do. The body behaves differently every day. So just to get hold of that body and the rhythm and keep it going, stamina, your age, your whatever, they're all the first layers. Once you cross all that is when you can think about, okay, am I in the moment? But it is definitely possible that with continued sadhana, there are times when you do feel that you're kind of going beyond and you do experience. And they're all momentary, like in everything else in life. When it comes to performances, the ideal situation or the ideal process is that what we practice, what we are thinking, what we create is a long process. Now, if I have an idea for a production, then I have to sit with it. I have to storyboard it. I have to see who's going to come on board. I have to create. I have to choreograph. I have to find the music. That takes a long process. And then when you're really putting it up in front of an audience, there is, of course, a certain amount of apprehension and wondering, okay, have I touched all the components to make this accessible to the people who are watching? But I am quite bound by my vocabulary. I cannot break it all to make it very easy for everybody to understand. So I have to only present what I have within the structure and within the vocabulary. So therefore, I think every practitioner, when they begin to dance and when they begin to perform, they do come to a kind of a level where they are able to keep the sadhana or the personal practice for themselves, and then also represent these choreographies when it is meant to be performative. So that is something that we kind of learn by experience. The way I would dance when I'm doing my practice would be slightly different. And if I'm presenting the same piece to an audience in a performance, I would go back and refine it a little bit to make it a little bit more appealing, or I would look at it, with a slightly different perspective. So that is a part of our job. It's like writing your journal, and then it's like writing a blog that public is going to read, right? So we do make those edits. So likewise in dance.
There's a question that's come up in the chat, so I'm going to ask that straight away. So do artists find it difficult to interact with common people? I don't know from where this came, but this has come. So I'll ask that. Do you find it difficult to interact with common people? You're interacting with a very, very common man now. So.
No, not at all. And unless and until you're talking about an artist who's living in a glass house, not otherwise.
They shouldn't be throwing stones then.
Yes.
So, and there's also another question. I don't know what this is, so I try to reframe it as I understand it. The question says, is there any limitation at all which arises due to learning, performing any art form? So I don't know what the question is.
Yeah,
perhaps they meant to do other parts of your compartments of your life become limited because of the art form? So I don't know. Yeah. So I just move to the next section. What are your thoughts on the Guru Shishya Parampara? Across the board, we see that, we still talk about the Guru, the Shishya Parampara, and all of those things. But across the board, if you look at traditional education, college, school education, I think that's changing dramatically, the way teachers relate to the students and all of that. But I am assuming that the Guru Shishya Parampara is still relevant, is still being practiced at least what I hear is that it's still relevant, it's still being practiced in the, dance and music and, Carnatic music, classical music. And I just wanted to get your thoughts on this. Has it changed from the time that you learned versus you teaching, and what are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, I mean, as cliche as it sounds, of course, it is changing. In fact, it is.
Yeah, I'm trying to get.
It's blown out of proportion.
I'm trying to get at how it has changed. I'm trying to get at how it has changed. So
see, traditionally, earlier I'm talking when it was still the age of traditional dances, traditional communities who were performing and practicing this art, and they were very guarded about whom they were going to teach. Ideally, it would be in their own community because they were a separate community for performing and following this art form and things like that. Once it kind of opened up and it was available to every section of societies, of course, the paradigms changed. But to a large extent, there is still that reverence to what we learn from our teacher, what they have taught. And in a very ideal scenario, we just follow it for life. For example, I still dance and practice the compositions that my teacher taught me. And I don't necessarily modify it or change it just because it is not suiting my fancy at this particular point of time. So to a large extent, overall, that is the way it is. But the Guru Sishya Parampara, I don't think, first of all, there is a parampara simply because there are plenty of gurus, like everybody is a guru. And earlier, the context was that there was a guru who was a non-performing artist whose only job was to teach and mentor students. Today, because of also the times that we are in, so many other economic conditions, every performer is bound to teach because teaching gives them that kind of a money for them to be able to perform. So everybody is a teacher. Almost all the performing dancers are teachers. So then the dynamic is already shifted, because when I am a performing artist and I am also teaching, after a point of time, I'm performing, my students are performing, oftentimes we are performing together, oftentimes we're performing on the same festival. So the whole thing about, okay, now who's a teacher, who's a student, has kind of, the context has shifted. And what today a guru and Sishya, overall what I observe is that there is a guru who's a performing dancer, they have a particular style. They want all their students to only dance the way they dance. If I have a style, I want my students to dance just like me. So my projection, my ideas as an artist is out there. Earlier, it was not like that. Every guru had unique students who had individual styles of dancing. And you could see that each person coming out of that guru had their own, had a very high level of individuality. You could never look at the two of them and say, oh, they would say they come from the same Bani, from the same Pathati, but you could never pick up one and say, I know this is that guru's student. But today, if you look at one dancer, you can very clearly map saying, oh, she's jumping like her, he's making faces like her, he's splitting like her, he's doing a... So I think that itself has kind of, it's just thrown this whole thing out of context. And now everybody likes calling themselves gurus and the students call everybody gurus. So I don't know. And first of all, the whole connotation of guru itself is very troublesome for me, because as a teacher of dance, I'm not a guru. I'm just a teacher teaching a skill which has a particular context. But then the world is the way it is. So yeah.
How's the audience, the Rasikas, the connoisseurs, how's that changed over time? Have you seen it changing during your time itself, and also the organizers, their expectations or their demands? Yeah. Has that changed?
This is a grouse that all dancers and I think all artists are going to perhaps carry on forever, as long as they're going to be associated with art. There is the ecosystem of art per se, right? You have the artists, you have the organizers, you have the Rasikas. This triad, right? This is a very troublesome triad, right? It's always in a perpetual imbalance, and I don't think we will achieve the balance at all. So one has to accept that. And everybody have their own problems, and they're right in that space. If an artist has a problem saying the organizer is not paying me enough, the organizer has a problem saying I don't have sponsors enough. And if the organizer has sponsors and if the artist is paid, you don't get audience. So this is like the egg chicken. I don't know if this will ever be solved. But I would say that the audiences are more informed. They are less patient. Earlier, you would have kacharis happening for 3 hours. I have personally danced in performances which have been for 2 hours, and I've had audiences sitting and watching. And today, if I do for half an hour, people get bored. And the first question organizer says, "Tumba jasti time beda, ಒಂದು 20 ನಿಮಿಷ ಮಾಡ್ಬಿಡಿ ಸಾಕು." So what was a full-fledged 3-hour kacheri is now come to 20 ನಿಮಿಷ, and eventually ಏನು ಮಾಡಕ್ಕಾಗಲ್ಲ. ನಾವ್ ಏನ್ ಮಾಡ್ತೀವೋ ಅದೇ ಆರ್ಟು. And they'll say, "Oh, ಚೆನ್ನಾಗಿತ್ತು, 20 ನಿಮಿಷ ಚೆನ್ನಾಗಿತ್ತು, I have to go," and they will go. So this is, see, this comes back to a question saying that the setting that we are in right now, right? Because art really is not a priority either. I mean, especially with the audiences and for organizers, I do empathize with them because it is very hard being an organizer. I have my own friends who have, who do conduct chamber concerts, and it's a lot of work. It's a lot of pain. Where do you get funds from? How much am I going to put in my own funds? And so if I'm an artist and I start a organization on my own to promote art and culture, if I call a fellow artist, I can't tell her, "Please dance or sing for me free," because I know what it means to be an artist. I must pay. How much can I pay? Where do I find my sponsors? This is, it's just what it is. But I think on the positive side, the fact that there are so many YouTube videos, the Instagram, of course, is filled with millions and millions of dancers. And of what I observe, there seem to be enough audience for them for their 30 seconds reel, 40 seconds reel. There are dancers on Instagram who get lakhs of views. So I suppose there are audiences, but maybe they have changed. Maybe they are not there in person, but they prefer to watch a YouTube video or on Insta reel or something else. So
something that's come up on the chat window says it's 3 minutes in the US actually. So not even 20 minutes. 20 ನಿಮಿಷನೂ ಇಲ್ಲ, 3 ನಿಮಿಷದಲ್ಲಿ ಮಾಡ್ಕೊಡಿ.
Oh yeah. See,
so I think even the live performance is an Insta reel. So
yeah, it's 45 seconds, and it's amazing that dancers can do that. So they deck up for 4 hours and they can come and do an Insta reel for 30 seconds and they'll get a lakh of likes. I guess it's working in some skewed way.
I think there are a couple of questions which I think you've addressed actually. I think it says the classical arts demand more patience and understanding to appreciate its inherent nuances. Is there any way an artist can deliver such fine acts, I think it is, to the average audience in today's bustling times? I think we touched this. Are we open to improvisation, to engage with the youth of today, to bring them into the fold of performing arts? Somebody's asking.
Oh, wow. I think the dance field is filled with youth who can jump, who can sing, who can dance. They can do a contemporary reel, they can do a classical reel. I mean, we really have a pool of real talented youngsters. It's just that I think what the challenge is to channelize that energy and get them to believe in the concept called patience, time, and investment. If we could do that, then I think we would have a generation of amazing, multifaceted artists. But that takes time. I don't know how much of you are willing to spend that kind of a time.
Right. There was something that I wanted to take up with you and kind of play the devil's advocate when I was introducing you. You speak of...
Actually, Ramesh, I've been feeling like that from the beginning of this interview. I don't know how much of your question I have been able to answer.
No, I think you've answered more. I think more than what I've asked. I don't know. Okay. But I did not play the devil's advocate intentionally, but now I'm going to. So
okay, I'll try.
So you speak of the evolution of gender equality in Indian classical dance. Right? That's something that I didn't quite get it. I mean, I didn't understand so what exactly do you mean? And because I think, hasn't dance always been a feminine primary field, Nataraja notwithstanding? So what exactly do you mean by this?
No, see, it was like that. I mean, because it is a fine art and it has a certain amount of grace. It has been a domain of the woman for a long time. But what the course intended basically to do was to be able to trace that evolution, where it began from. You take from Nataraja itself, the source, who's considered as the cosmic dancer. And then you have all the, if you were to go in that path, then you have all the Gandharvas and, all the Apsaras who are dancing. And then you come down a little bit. Every king had to know all the 64 arts of which dance and music was a part of. Maybe those kings didn't have enough time to perform, but they definitely did have a working or a good knowledge of it. Then if you take the Puranas, you have Brihannala, of course,
Right.
very popular. So there you have the first concept of a male dancing. But the idea of the course was really to be able to tell them that it's not an imbalanced perspective. As much as you have women performing, you have equal number of men who have taken to dance, and they are doing a fantastic job. I think when men dance, there is a certain amount of strength that naturally comes, and the entire a whole generation or a whole section of society has always viewed dance and associated dance with women. So now when a male dances, suddenly these movements look very different, and they do have a way of manifesting themselves aesthetically, and it looks beautiful. Personally, the problem with me is when a male tries to be over feminine and a female tries to be over masculine. Because inherently the male body and the female body has its own charm and its own identity. So when dance movements manifest in these physical bodies, it has its own individual beauty and aesthetics that is appealing. Oftentimes, when teachers are teaching male dancers, it tends to get into that space where the boy is trying to imitate overly like a girl, and then it kind of gets into a little difficult challenge. So the intent of that course was to be able to draw, saying that it is right now actually well balanced, because essentially it's a skill, and anybody who takes to that skill, who practices it, will be able to delineate the form and express it in their own unique individual way, and it is equally appealing. So that was the purpose of that particular. In fact, there are plenty, the dance industry is in fact booming with male dancers, and now I have a lot of my students, so much so that organizers prefer male dancers and they don't prefer female dancers anymore. So I have my students coming up saying, Miyaka, he got it, I didn't get it because the organizer wanted a male dancer. It's good, and I personally like watching male dancers because the aesthetics is so different, and some movements look so beautiful on them if done well, of course. So it's not that it's a female bastion at all. It's quite equally poised, is what I observe.
Yes. I quite relate to that thing about some men being very effeminate in their expressions, because I've personally seen one dance teacher who I thought was and I was even taken to task for having said that. So that is when I was still very, very young and all that. So I said, so I quite agree with what you said about that there has to be this subtle differences in the way the expressions come to.
See, that's nature itself. It's
right,
nature
correct,
itself,
absolutely,
right?
absolutely.
Yeah, the way, see, for example, you have parents and you have a child. Both the parents love the child, and the way a father would express his love for the child is very different from the way a mother, like a father would hug a child, would be different from the way a mother will hug a child, right? Similarly, so I don't need to go on, I mean, I can, but the whole idea is that both these dancing bodies have its own individual enjoyable aesthetic. So there is no need to go beyond and try to imitate or be like one another. They look beautiful by themselves. They're unique by themselves. And if a teacher is able to bring that out, for example, I have a male student, and when we were doing one composition on Shringara, right? So I had to tell him that this is your Shringara. You do it the way you would feel. How would you behave if you're in love? Or how would you behave when you're talking to your friend who is a girl? You don't have to act like a girl. You act like you. Then that emotion comes out like you, like the dancer. And then one is able to see that quality and that aesthetic and that individuality. I don't need to imitate a female. when I already have so many females dancing?
Right. I
So
think
it's
you
just about that.
I think you answered the question that's come up on the chat. Most kritis for dance are heroine based. How do male dancers deal with this? I think you answered that question.
Yeah.
So that is one. And I think there's one more question. Do you think it is time to build a generation of rasikas rather than artists? Provide art appreciation at the school level.
No, I don't think so.
Yeah.
I don't think so. At the
I
school
don't-
level,
Right.
see, again, art is a very personal aesthetic at the end of the day. Even if you take a cross section of audience who's watching one dancer, right? What I like in that dancer or in that musician is going to be very different from how you will relate to that art. Art appreciation, yes, I think, especially Bangalore has opened up many small performative spaces where artists are invited and they have begun to talk about their art, and they have made, they have kind of tried to, let's say, remove a few walls, because I have audiences coming up saying, I didn't understand anything before, but after you spoke, I realized, okay, I can actually go and watch. So Bangalore has been a hub, especially in the last few years, where a lot of chamber concerts have opened up and artists have begun to explain. They've tried to break down certain myths and perceptions about art, and it has helped a lot of audience. At least they're willing to try and they're willing to take the effort to go and watch. I think that is important. I think it can be done more, but to expect the same on an actual proscenium stage would be slightly difficult and challenging. So yeah, I mean, there's a context to it.
Right. I think I have just one more question before I think you touched upon it right at the beginning. The government support or the lack of it for artists, patronage, because patronage and one of the reasons something that we've been working on for a long time is the fact that our temples are not free. I think that is one of the reasons why patronage itself is missing. So if you have any final thoughts on that, the patronage, government support for artists. Obviously the lack of it that you pointed out right at the beginning.
Yes. I won't say it's not there, it is there, but it's just not channelized in the right way so that it can reach the audiences. For example, you have plenty of scholarships from the Karnataka state government. The Karnataka state government gives a scholarship for students between 20 and 25 to pursue, and they give you 10,000 rupees a year. Teachers will charge anywhere about 2,500 to 3,000 rupees per month for classes.
Yeah.
So 10,000 rupees is for what? And if it's a student who is living very far away, just to commute from one end of Bangalore to the other, the 10,000 rupees is gone. So no, I'm not saying it's not there. I think it's there, but I like all other challenges. It is about how these funds are channelized to the most deserving. And at a higher level, for example, if you look at the Indian Council for Cultural Relations, right, they have something called as empanelment of artists. So you send in your videos, they will empanel you. That allows you to go to festivals abroad, right? Now, again, I need to constantly go show my face, network, find somebody to give me give a letter of recommendation. And if there are funds, if I need funds from the government, there is so much of paperwork. Like all sectors, all these problems are there, and it's just so laborious. Unlike other spaces, for an artist, it becomes more cumbersome simply because we create art, we have to practice, we have to put it together, and we need that extra time for PR and networking and getting the paperwork. Unless I come from a very privileged family or whatever, where I have 10 people who can do all that for me. So I think it's just the ecosystem that is it's there, but it's not really that useful for an artist. Somewhere we just give up because we're so tired to fight against the system. So to say it's not there would be incorrect. It is there, but how it's reaching artists, and especially I think folk artists, right? Papa Orgela, they don't even know anything. it's a mess.
Right. It's a mess.
It's a
So,
mess, yeah.
Yeah. So that's a bit.
And sorry, I wanted to just touch upon temples. So while we do talk about free temples, right? The fact that many of the temples don't allow dance to happen in temples itself is a pain point. For example, recently for Shivratri, my students and I danced in the Alsur Someshwara temple, which is like about 1,000-year-old temple in Bangalore. We were given, one badly made, stage in a corner and dance. And then I said, no, we cannot dance there because the nails are coming out. And I said, in the Nritta Mandapa, there's a small place. I said, give us that space. Then the temple authorities came and said, ayo, allela MLA bartare, allela ni madakagalla. So temples them, and it's not even that they are paying us. We are going and doing it because it's Shivratri, it's an offering.
Yeah.
So even if artists go willingly to these temples and says, let's dance in the temple because it has a context and, it has so many things associated with it. Temples are not open to giving us that space, or they just make it somewhere in the corner and,
I do remember that. But I think you had written about it also.
I've written about it, yes.
Right.
Yes. So, as it is, dance is so away from so many of these things. So even if temples don't make an active, what do you say? If they don't have an intention of at least bringing it once a while. But then on the other end, you have the Shivratri in places like Chidambaram, where they give you a 5-minute slot and you have like thousands of dancers waiting. That's another mayhem. So you see, how much it has changed is it's so obvious, right? The context of how it was and how it has become right now. It's chaotic. It is, it's like a maze that every dancer is trying to figure out. And there are no easy answers. There are no easy ways. But then we do it because we love the arts, and that's how art survives. So it all boils down to the individual's passion and the individual's will to say, I like this, I want to teach it, I want to perform it, I want to show it. Whether it's an audience full of chairs or it's 2 or it's 10, we continue. And that's just what it is. As melancholic and dramatic as it sounds, it comes down to that individual will. And some give up, some continue. I think that has been my personal observation. Yeah.
Okay. So I think we are almost out of time, but I'm not going to let you go without asking you about the daily rangoli that you come up with.
Oh my God. Gosh, you too, Ramesh. I don't know. What do you want me to talk about?
I don't know. But no, okay. Let just tell me why. Just tell us why you even started that. I know how you started it, so I just wanted to. It's. I mean, I must also say that it's one of the most beautiful things that we get to see early in the morning. So
thank you.
When we open up your social media. So.
No, I just have that patch that you see every day. I have that patch in front of my house. So I go to drop my son to tennis early in the morning. So in between picking up and dropping back, I have some time. So one day I was just sitting outside and I just drew it, and then it just became a habit. And I'm a very inconsistent person. I'm not at all consistent. So when I began doing that rangoli, the kolam, I just told myself, let me see how long I can keep with this. So it's roughly been about 430 days of new rangolis. Right. And that's the longest percentage of consistency I can be proud of. So I don't know how long it will last.
There's even someone in the chat who's saying, yes, Ramaji, please let us know about the rangoli. She's okay. So,
I really enjoy it. I think it's I mean, anybody who wants to do it, please pick up the habit and do it. However bad it looks or good it looks, that's not the point. I think it's just a beautiful habit to get up early in the morning, splash water in front and touch the rangoli and feel the bhumi. Those few moments are very precious to me, and I have really learned a lot. I have improved a little bit on my concentration. I have more stability in my fingers, and I feel so validated when people like my kolam, because I always wanted to be an artist. I'm not one, and this kolam is a way of me trying to be some form of an artist. So, and I've enjoyed this. I've begun to really cherish my column. And as long as God's will and it lasts, it lasts.
I think that it was absolutely a pleasure. I mean, speaking with you. And,
thank you, Ramesh. I hope I hope whatever I said was answering your
no,
questions.
that it answered quite a few. It answered quite a few questions. It's given me a lot more questions as well. I would like to now pass it on to Dr. M.R. Sitaram. Dr. M.R. Sitaram is an orthopedic surgeon. He's also one of the founder members of the Swami Vivekananda Youth Movement, and I would request him to give the concluding remarks for today's session.
Thank you, Ramesh, and thank you, Ramaji. I think I'll switch off the video and just keep the audio on. It was, like Ramesh said, a real pleasure to be part of this program. And while you have definitely answered a lot of questions, I'd start by saying that it has been an extremely thought-provoking interaction. So it has raised as many questions as it has answered. And I think for the 30-odd people who have been fortunate enough to be part of this conversation, that is the best part of it. Finding answers which are ready-made is not the best thing to help one's own self-improvement and evolution. Questioning is, and I think a lot of things that you mentioned, at least for me, set me on a thought process, which I hope I'll be able to further inquire within. As concluding remarks, I'd just like to pick up a few points and end it quickly. Like Ramesh said, we're already out of time. And time was perhaps one issue that came up. You mentioned the shrinking duration of the kacheris. As a doctor, I have this problem every time. The doctors don't have time, patients don't have time. Everybody wants immediate cure, pop a pill and kick all ills out. That sort of a race which nobody seems to be sure where it's going to lead. I think from that point of view, dance by itself or any art form by itself is a microcosm of the big society and the changes that we are seeing in the society. So this a race to nowhere is perhaps affecting a lot of people. Recently, I was asked to talk about emotional health and spiritual health, and as I was trying to look at what to tell people, this was a group of a company which was again racing against the deadlines. I realized that stopping for a moment and questioning yourself where you are and what you are doing would perhaps be the best starting point. And I think from your reflections, from the answers that you have given, it certainly provoked a lot of thought in me. The point that you mentioned about dance being a window, not just to do certain movements or not just to do certain abhinaya, but go beyond it and understand more things. I think that should be the spirit for all pursuits, not just for dance. But if I am a doctor, probably I should be looking at doctor as a window, my profession as a window to look at so many other things, which will probably broaden my perspective. And I think that was an excellent point that you made, the reflection about how you started as a teacher and how that perhaps made you a more whole person. I think that is something that we have to understand and perhaps practice as well. I just quickly look at two main things that you seem to focus on. One is that it's an internal thing. It's an inner evolution. And the connect between the artist and the connoisseur, the Rasika and the Kalavida, that's what you are mentioning. I think that is extremely important. And that's true for all of us. We need to look inwards. And that inner growth is perhaps a more sustainable source of one's joy. So whatever we are doing, if we can have that reflection of inward-looking approach. I think that's an excellent practice that we can try to imbibe. I was reading DVG's Mankutimana Kaga recently. There was a beautiful, muktaka in that. It said, Pustakadi doreta rivu, mastakadi taledamani. You read so many things, and all the knowledge you gain is but a gem or a ruby that you can wear on your head. But chittadolu beleda arivu, taru taleda pushpa. When that grows from within, that is when it is lively. That is when it is organic. Absolutely. So he says that the inner evolution is by Atma Vikshane, Shastritanadindalla. So it's not enough if you read books, not enough if you gain knowledge, but whatever you have gained, you use it as a mirror or a window to look within yourself and then grow. I think that was a beautiful message that you gave from your reflections. I hope we will all try to do in whatever little way that we can. The second part was about the society part, where I think I disagree with you to some extent. But by and large, given the current trends, you very beautifully and very practically, realistically explain what the situation is. You mentioned about the artist who is trying to express something, and the Rasika who is able to resonate and probably have that connect. The current problem is probably that we don't have enough of such Kalavidas, enough of such Rasikas. So from the I'm going to the other part of what I wanted to share. I think it is a collective responsibility to look at both these two ends and see if we can increase the Kalavidas, support the Kalavidas, and at the same time nurture an environment where I can also understand the language of an art. You mentioned that Bharatanatyam as a language has certain expressions. So it's just that I don't know that language, and therefore I'm not able to appreciate it. So if we can have a mechanism where more people can learn this language from the known towards the unknown, if we can look at dance as a medium for that journey as well, I'm sure we will be able to create a mutual win-win. There is this beautiful famous saying which says you can only take the horse to the water, can't make it drink. That's true. But can we ask if the horse was thirsty at all to begin with? Can we create a thirst in the horse? So it will look for the water by itself. You don't have to take it.
Absolutely.
So I feel that organizations like SVYM, we've been trying to do small little things like this in triggering of some additional introspection, some small change, baby steps, which builds individuals, and collectively, all individuals together make up the society. So I end with the optimism that you gave me when you said that the dance field is full of talented youngsters. I think that was a great statement that I take in a very positive way. If we can build the right sort of patience, dedication, hard work that you mentioned in this young band, I'm sure we will be able to look forward to a much vibrant and mutually supportive society. So thank you very much. It was a fantastic pleasure to listen to you. I hope to be in touch and look at the rangolis that you draw out. And let's hope
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you so much.
Thank you, Ramesh. Thanks for the opportunity.
Yeah. Thank you. No, my pleasure. Yeah, and thank you, everybody. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you so much, Ramesh.
Yeah,
Such a pleasure. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you, Ramaa. It was an absolute. The pleasure was all mine.
Yes.
And thank you, everybody.
Thank you all for joining us. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you. And next week we'll be speaking with Shalini Saraswati. Shalini Saraswati is a blade runner, so we will be speaking to her. And she also won a bronze medal in 2018 at the Paralympics. So speaking to Shalini next week, look forward to that. Please join us again. And I might add that all of these conversations would be also available on YouTube, and we'll be sharing those things. Thank you, everyone. Thank you, Ramaa.
Thank you.